You know that feeling, right? You're staring at a problem, a goal, or just life, and you feel completely, totally stuck. It's like this paralysis where doing anything feels impossible. But what if that feeling isn't just a mood? What if it's actually a psychological response that we've learned? Okay, let's dive into this because figuring out why we get stuck is really the only way to get free.
I mean, really think about it for a sec. Have you ever been in a situation and just thought, you know what? I'm not even going to try. If I don't play the game, I can't lose. It's a surprisingly common thought, and it's right at the heart of what we're talking about today.
So, where does a feeling like that even come from?
Well, it often starts with a psychological phenomenon called learned helplessness. And the crazy thing is, our entire understanding of it kicked off with a series of experiments that were, well, pretty shocking, to be honest.
So, what that really means is this. Learned helplessness is what happens when we're in a situation where it feels like nothing we do makes a difference. After you go through that enough times, where your actions have zero effect on the outcome, you basically learn to stop trying. You learn to be helpless, even when your situation changes and you're not helpless anymore. This whole story really gets going back in 1967 with a psychologist named Martin Seligman. He wasn't actually trying to discover learned helplessness at all. He was studying depression. But what he and his team saw in their lab completely changed our understanding of motivation and despair.
All right, let's break down the experiment. There were three groups of dogs. Group 1, they were basically the control group, nothing really happened to them. Now, Group 2, they had some control. They could press a lever to stop random electric shocks. But Group 3, this is the key. They got the exact same shocks as Group 2, but their lever did absolutely nothing. For them, the pain was completely random and totally inescapable. Okay, so for the next part of the test, they took all three groups and put them in what's called a shuttle box. It's simple. On one side, they'd get a shock, but all they had to do to be safe was jump over a tiny little barrier to the other side. It was a super easy escape. And this is where things get really fascinating, and honestly, a little heartbreaking. The dogs from the first two groups, they figured it out right away and jumped to safety. But most of the dogs from Group 3, the ones who had learned that their actions didn't matter, they just lay down. They took the shock. They had learned to be helpless so deeply that they didn't even try to escape, even when escape was right there.
But here's the thing. This tendency to just give up isn't only about what we learn from bad experiences. It's also backed up by this really powerful glitch, a cognitive bias that's pretty much hardwired into all of our brains, one that makes us deeply, fundamentally afraid of taking risks.
And this bias is called loss aversion. Put simply, it means that losing something feels way, way worse than gaining that exact same thing feels good. Our brains are just naturally wired to play defense, to avoid losses at all costs.
Here's a simple way to think about it. Imagine you find a $10 bill on the street. Feels pretty good, right? A nice little win. Now, imagine you reach into your pocket and realize you lost a $10 bill. That feeling, that sting of frustration, is almost always way more powerful than the little burst of joy from finding it. In fact, there's research on this. The groundbreaking work by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky showed that the psychological pain of losing something is about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining it. I mean, that's a huge difference. It totally explains why we'd rather not lose $10 than find $10. So, when you put these two big ideas together, you start to see this really powerful combination. On one hand, learned helplessness teaches you that your efforts might be totally pointless. And on the other hand, loss aversion is screaming in your ear that trying and failing is going to hurt way more than succeeding will feel good. It's just a perfect storm for staying stuck. Okay, so we've seen the lab experiments, we've looked at the cognitive biases, but where does this pattern actually start in real life? Well, a lot of the time, the seeds of learned helplessness are planted way back in our earliest relationships, especially with our parents. Psychologists often map out different parenting styles using two main scales: control, which is about rules and expectations, and responsiveness, which is about warmth and support. And when we're talking about learned helplessness, the real danger zone is in how that control part plays out. Because you see, not all control is the same. There's behavioral control, which is about managing a kid's actions. Setting a curfew, making them do their chores. That's about setting healthy boundaries. But then there's psychological control, and that is way more invasive. It's when a parent tries to control a child's inner world, their thoughts, their feelings, often by using manipulation. And here is the absolute key. Psychological control teaches a kid a very dangerous lesson. Your success or failure is directly tied to whether you get love and security. It makes that parent-child connection feel totally conditional.
It's like, do well and I will love you. Fail and that love might just go away. And you see it in tactics like these. Guilt trips. I sacrifice so much for you. Or withdrawing love. I'm so disappointed I don't even want to look at you right now. Or shaming. All of these teach a child that their actions don't just have practical results, they have these massive, devastating emotional consequences. It's a direct path to feeling like you're never good enough, and that failure isn't just a setback, it's an emotional catastrophe. So, what's the big deal? Why does all this matter? Because these patterns, whether they're learned in a lab or in a childhood home, they don't just stay there. They create this massive ripple effect that spreads across our entire adult lives and really across all of society.
The impact is just enormous. Learned helplessness is a major factor in why people stay in abusive relationships. It can drive failure in school when a student truly believes they're just not smart enough to get better. It can lead to passivity, anxiety. It can even cause older people to just neglect their own well-being because they feel like they have no control over their health anyway. And that really brings us to the core takeaway here. When you take these three powerful forces, the learned belief that you have no control, the innate fear of losing, and a childhood where love felt like it had to be earned, you get a vicious cycle. It's like a psychological cage that can keep someone stuck for years, terrified to try anything new, and convinced it's all pointless anyway. But this story doesn't have to end there. And that leaves us with one last, really powerful question. The very name of the condition, learned helplessness, implies it's not born in us, it's taught. So if being helpless is something that can be learned, it has to stand to reason that its opposite, that feeling of control and agency, can be learned too. And that, right there, is a thought worth holding on to.